Here we go.
Greetings and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much indeed for joining Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development, where we discuss pertinent issues of peace and sustainability around the world and across Africa. Our theme today is Global Transformations on the Way to a New World Order. In these turbulent times, a new world order is necessary and urgent. The speaker is Professor Yury Sayamov. Professor Sayamov is a diplomat and an academic who has taught at the Faculty of Global Processes of the Moscow State University, Russia. Thank you so much, Yury, for finding the time to share your insights and experience with Solidarity for Peace and Development, MAMA. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Yury Sayamov.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, dear Professor Mutalemwa, dear participants, dear friends. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to address you at this conference devoted to the most important problems of human survival, those of peace, security, and cooperation. Africa has always been considered in Russia and by Russian people as a space of friendship and solidarity. My country has always been and continues struggling against colonialism in all its forms and the present attempts of its revival. In my student times, being a vice president of the International Union of Students, I was working together with many outstanding African student leaders participating in joint solidarity campaigns. That was also the time when I had a chance and visited Tanzania and Dar es Salaam University. Today, I am going to speak on global social transformations on the way to a new world order. As a recent report by the World Academy of Art and Science, which I am the member of, stated, the humanity entered the era defined by unprecedented uncertainty, by distrust and insecurity. The world faces a multi-dimensional crisis, called sometimes polycrisis, encompassing political, economic, technological, social, environmental spheres that defy traditional solutions. The present global turbulence was accelerated by the economic crisis, by the ongoing conflicts everywhere, climate change, and the development of artificial intelligence as both opportunity and threat. The current period represents the fastest pace of change in human history, and the attempts of the humanity to adapt to it and to cover the gap between the speed of development and the human ability to understand it, called the human gap. Institutions, values, governance today lag far behind technological advances. The turbulence appears as a clash between progressive forces driving the world to a better future and safeguarding its universal values, and reactionary forces resisting change through nationalism, through authoritarianism, and cultural retrenchment. The resulting tensions generate social polarization, institutional weakness, and the erosion of multilateral cooperation. Power is shifting from traditional centers to new configurations. National governments are challenged by corporations, scientific approaches by populist narratives, middle class expectations by extremes of wealth for few and poverty for many. Today, the top of the top 0.1% alone holds as much wealth as the bottom 90%. It is essential to understand the present world dynamics and transformations in order to develop effective responses to civilizational challenges. Internationally, we witness declining authority of global institutions and weakening adherence to commitments like the global agenda and sustainable development goals, above all the needs of the least developed countries. Militarily, the attempts of the West to govern the world have revived arms races and nuclear threats, destroying peace and imposing on humanity new wars and conflicts. Politically, democratic principles erode with the shift toward autocracy, plutocracy, and oligarchy, with national sovereignty increasingly undermined by financial elites and multinational corporations. Economically, high inequality combines with rising job insecurity and social impacts, and challenges which remain inadequately addressed and inadequately answered. Environmentally, escalating ecological challenges threaten human security, while global cooperation to address these challenges remains obviously insufficient. These interconnected consequences reinforce each other, creating a kind of self-perpetuating cycle, almost, let us say, vicious cycle of instability, and demands comprehensive solutions addressing root causes rather than symptoms alone. Humanity today can no more be governed by ideas and institutions of the 19th and 20th century. The world stands at the threshold of what has been called the beginning of infinity, an era of potentially unbounded progress, which can be made possible by our capacity to generate explanatory knowledge. It means knowledge which explains. Every problem people face is soluble in principle, and this requires to seek and apply better explanations so that the solutions address, as I said already, root causes. There are no hard limits to human progress other than our persistence to bad ideas, inadequate institutions, or failure to act how we want to act. The turbulence and polycrisis of our time are therefore not evidence of inevitable decline, but signs that inherited frameworks are breaking down and must be replaced by new knowledge, by new values and systems capable of addressing complexity at a planetary scale. The signals indicate a tradition, not a collapse of our human project. Three priorities emerge as essential for a stable and prosperous future. First, rebuilding global governance to a platform for the systemic change needed to establish a new, more just world order. Second, reframing security around human needs rather than military rivalry to address the root causes of instability. And third, advancing economic justice to counter extreme inequality and ensure that new technologies translate into broad-based opportunity. Taken together, these three, if you want, pillars define the challenge of our time, creating a new global order that is more resilient, more inclusive, and more equitable. The current international relations are increasingly incapable of meeting the scale of contemporary global challenges. Only 16% of UN Sustainable Development Goals, or what we call global agenda, remain on track, while the annual funding gap for achieving them has grown to more than 14 trillion of US dollars. Even though, as we know, that the global agenda involves 193 UN member states, they adopted by consensus the global agenda and voluntarily took the responsibility to fulfill it. But the progress has been slow and uneven. Attempts are made by Western states to substitute the international law by their unlawful decisions. For strategic advantage, they are bypassing or ignoring multilateral legal norms, whether through wars of aggression, as we see in US-Israel aggression against Iran, Israel aggression against Palestinian and Lebanese people, or allied aggression of the West against Russia from Ukraine. We witness the escalation of violence also through the growing use of tariffs as unilateral foreign policy tools of the United States and its allies, which they are using instead of reliance on UN and world trade mechanisms. This shift from universal law to selective enforcement reflects the weakening of multilateral institutions. The result is a system unable to deliver peace, cooperation, and development, prevent and eliminate conflicts. Without new approaches, negotiated ceasefires or temporary settlements will simply reproduce future conflicts. As a solution, a new security paradigm must be built on human security and cooperative systems rather than military rivalry. Key priorities include today shift from military to human security, development of the human security for all campaigns as a model approach proposed by the United Nations and a lot of non-governmental organizations. Launch of a global peace offensive that reframes crisis response into opportunities for lasting peace and cooperation. Building of inclusive cooperative security systems that move beyond Cold War alignments and guarantee peace for all. The world must evolve from military security systems that perpetuate violence to human-centered and cooperative frameworks that address root causes of insecurity. Rising economic inequality has become one of the defining drivers of instability worldwide. Achieving economic justice requires systemic interventions that redistribute opportunity, strengthen employment security, and rebalance wealth and power. The emerging theory of change rests on a clear causal logic. Systemic turbulence is driven by accelerating technology, entrenched inequality, geopolitical rivalry, and climate stress, all compounded by the erosion of governance. Left unmanaged, these forces reinforce a cycle of insecurity, populism, and institutional decline. The pathway out of these challenges requires interventions across three levels. At the structural level, reforming financial systems, global governance, and security architectures. It is, as we understand, very essential to restore legitimacy for all and cooperation. At the level of society, redressing economic injustice and building inclusive social contracts. At the level of consciousness, reframing core concepts of security, sovereignty, and power. If achieved together, these interventions have the potential to get and to produce outcomes in human security, global governance, renewal, economic justice, sustainability, and the expansion of knowledge that can accumulate the conditions for a peaceful and stable order. The underlying premise is pragmatic but optimistic. Namely, humanity's capacity for explanatory knowledge means that none of these problems are insoluble, but their resolution depends on political will and institutionalized innovation responding to the challenges the humanity is facing. In other words, we have to state that addressing global turbulence, 10 core concepts demand critical rethinking. First, security must shift from militaristic frameworks toward human security for all. Second, freedom requires reimagining as both personal autonomy and collective empowerment, resisting both populism and plutocracy. Third, sovereignty must protect for all the capacity to act independently with others for resolving of problems. Economics must be redefined from a machine for endless growth and consumption to a system of provisioning for long-term human welfare and ecological sustainability. Identity should foster unity through shared values, while preserving cultural diversity, transcending exclusion and division. Justice must move beyond punishment toward restoration, toward peace and social cohesion, making empathy and equity converge. Knowledge must be open, plural, and resilient to manipulation while integrating objective and subjective dimensions of reality founded on universal values. Time concept must expand beyond short-term calculations to address slow, long-term systemic crises requiring intergenerational thinking. It means we have to worry not only about ourselves, but about those to come after us. Time concept. this I already said. Human nature relationship must recognize ecological interdependence as strategic imperative, not merely moral argument. And power must be reconceived as the ability to set others free rather than impose control, rooted in service to others and affirmation of universal values. The turbulence of our time is not the result of isolated crises, but of systemic failures in how humanity organizes power, distributes resources, and conceives of security, justice, and progress. Globalization, technological acceleration, inequality, and ecological strain have outpaced the capacity of existing institutions and values to adapt, leaving societies vulnerable to fragmentation, polarization, and mistrust. Incremental reforms that address symptoms alone will not be sufficient. What is required is transformation across all layers, all levels. The magnitude of contemporary challenges requires comprehensive approaches to conscious social transformation of our human community. The crises we face today are profound, but they are not destiny. They are problems awaiting solutions that lie within humanity's reach through the growth of explanatory knowledge, through the redesign of institutions to harness that knowledge and the civilization, cultivation of values can bring to us, that empower inclusion and cooperation. If we treat turbulence as a generative condition rather than a terminal threat, we can transform polycrisis into an opportunity. In this sense, our age is the end of one era as part of humanity's progression, and the advances we are now making place us at the beginning of new era, a moment when conscious transformation can align human systems with unbounded progress in ways that are sustainable. The choice before us is quite simple. It is a choice between science, truth seeking, and rejection of bad explanation and fractured systems. To embrace and use our potential of knowledge, potential of science diplomacy to establish a sustainable, just and peaceful future for all. I tried my best to put all this in a quite short form because it took already over 20 minutes, and I'm not sure that you are ready to listen to me more than half an hour. This is why I think there should be some minutes left in case there are some questions or maybe somebody of my dear colleagues would like to say something regarding what I have presented. Anyway, there are other topics of interest, such as, for example, problems of education, which we established the concept of 5 Ds decolonization, de-westernization, demonopolization, decommercialization, deprimitivization. We proposed it all to the third global report elaborated by UNESCO under the presidence of the President of Ethiopia, Madame Sahle Zewde. It is published already. Everyone can have a look at it at the UNESCO official website. Anyway, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I think I did not exceed your attention and the time you are ready to trust to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Yury, for this wonderful presentation. You've touched about a number of very important issues, and I'm sure now that participants who are ready to share their own experiences, ask questions on the issues that you have touched upon, such as the universal values that we need to be guided by those. But you are talking about transformation, transformation that needs to be comprehensive. And some of the institutions that are guiding us, we need to redesign them. And you've talked about translating policies on the poly crisis actually into opportunity. And I thought that's quite interesting. And you've talked about unbounded progress and the priorities that you have mentioned, rebuilding global governance, and this striving for security for people rather than for the military. I think that's also very, very important, and that we need to advance economic justice rather than inequalities at different levels, the structural, society, and consciousness. And I'm sure that participants have learned quite a lot. And I'd like now to open the floor for discussions. Whoever has a question, please just feel free. And we have enough time because you only spoke for about 30 minutes. And so we'll have time to discuss more.
Dear Professor, there is one question in the chat section.
All right.
If you permit, I would answer this.
Yeah, please do.
So the 5D policy for the futures of education, which we proposed, it is the policy composed of 5 principles. First of them is decolonization, which includes liberation from neocolonialism and neocolonialist approaches in education, binding educational help with imposing educational patterns of foreign educational systems. Mainly, it is what the West tries to impose on all of us, trying to colonize our consciousness. Second, it is de-westernization, making the education free from imposing on it influences of the West in its interest of upbringing local population contrary to national interests, cultures, and traditions. Third is demonopolization of education based on the recognition of achievements and value of national educational systems. Fourth is decommercialization of education, rejecting the governance of market principles in the educational sphere and the approach to education as to paid service only. Deprimitivization of education, introducing in it teaching on contemporary risks and challenges the humanity is facing, on ethics of life, including bioethics, on ethics of science, ethics of artificial intelligence, digitalization, and restoring the use of instruments of educational and scientific diplomacy and cooperation. This is 5D policy.
Thank you very much indeed. From Janet, I suppose. Please go ahead, Janet, owner.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you well.
I'm very impressed by the comprehensive nature of your talk.
Thank you so much.
And I think you covered all the general values and points of unity and coordination across the world. I'm curious what you think is the future of the UN and how we might support or contribute to its best efforts.
Thank you so much for your question. It is really a very important question, and just half an hour ago, a little bit more, I finished my lecture to the students of the Faculty of Law of the Moscow University. And there was a presentation by the group of students under this question: what is the future of the United Nations? And it is not an easy question, I would admit, because the United Nations system was born as the result of the outcome of the Second World War. It was born on the high wave of anti-fascist solidarity the world over. It is the wave which also destroyed with the time colonialism. First, it was, as you know, liberation of China, of Korea, then of India, then it came the declaration proposed by my country at the United Nations on the independence of colonial countries in 1960. Then there was a chain of deglobalization processes, and the United Nations was a backbone of the Yalta-Potsdam system of international relations established after the Second World War. First, the United Nations, its structure, its function, and its duties were discussed at the Conference of Allies in Yalta in 1945. And there was a discussion, there were different proposals. Finally, the leaders of the anti-Hitlerite coalition, they found unity in approaches, and the United Nations organization was established as a universal organization. And the statutes of the United Nations, what we should not forget, it is the source for the international law in action now. It means that though the Yalta-Potsdam system of international relations, which became, after the Fulton speech of Churchill in 1946, a bilateral and bipolar one, because still in Yalta and Potsdam, the Allies did not plan it as a bipolar system. They were still ready jointly to construct the post-war world. But the Churchill speech in Fulton changed the situation. It split the world into two parts. And this is why the Yalta-Potsdam system was bipolar. After one of the poles, let us say, committed suicide for internal reasons, the system as such ceased to exist as it is accustomed to see the situation among the scientists. But the United Nations remains, and the change in the system has always been after big catastrophes. First system, Westphalian order, was established after the 30 Years' War of 1648. Vienna system after Napoleonian Wars in 1815. Versailles system after the First World War. Yalta-Potsdam after the Second World War. But today, to apply this algorithm is very dangerous because new global confrontation is risky for the whole of humanity because it can end with the extermination not only of humanity but of the life on the planet Earth. Because the potentials of weaponry are able to kill the planet several dozens of times. This is why we have to find a solution by means of diplomacy, by peaceful redressment of the situation and of the global governance. Of course, the United Nations system needs reforming because it was created 80 years ago. The world, when it was created, cannot be compared with the world we live in today. It is a completely different world. That time, the majority of states existing today did not exist, or they were in the form of colonies. And of course, we share fully the demand of Africa, for example, to be represented in the composition of the permanent members of the Security Council. We fully share the demand by India to be within this composition, because India, it is what we call globality. It is a state dash civilization. It is like Russia unites state and civilization. It is also like China unites state and civilization. But we cannot share and support the demand of Japan or of Germany to be part in the composition of the permanent members of the UN Security Council. Why, you may ask? Because both countries are occupied countries till now. Japan, for example, has such an agreement about the presence of American troops on its territory that the Japanese government cannot even interfere in the decisions of the United States concerning the national territory of Japan. almost the same with Germany. As you know, my country has voluntarily withdrawn troops from Germany. But American troops are there, and Germany cannot alone take the decision about their withdrawal. It is occupied country. How it can govern the world and be responsible for it as the permanent member of the Security Council. However, today are some worrying elements. For example, as you know, Mr. Trump, the President of the United States, took a decision about the withdrawal of the United States from 66 international organizations, among them also organizations of the UN system, such as the World Health Organization or Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, known as ECOSOC, and so on. This is why we should not allow the chaos in international relations. Of course, we should, on the peaceful way, reform positively the United Nations system according to realities which are present in today's world, where we see, of course, attempts for domination from the West, but where we see the growing will of the world majority to say its word on the global arena. We fully support it, and this is why we supported the new BRICS global format, open for every country ready to participate and having a possibility to do so without any restriction, without any pretension for domination, without any pretension to be higher than any other state within this format. All what today we can count as illnesses of the present United Nations system, which should be, of course, somehow modified in the common interests of the whole of humanity. I do not know if I answered your question or not.
Thank you very much, Yury. You've answered the question, and if there's something more, Janet will ask again. Now I'd like to invite Dasu and then Joe for comments or questions. Dasu, please.
Thank you very much, George. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for your very good presentation. I will just ask you where Janet ended. Professor, we have seen the reality on the ground now. You talked about the aggressions. The great powers are invading other countries, and you pointed out the situation in Ukraine and recently in Iran. So, based on what some people have been suggesting, I find this quite intriguing. There are some people who have been suggesting that the only way to deter the aggression, especially from the great powers, is for other states to have nuclear weapons. Like they are saying, giving an example of North Korea. No nation, great power, will invade North Korea because it is possessing a nuclear weapon. So I would like to hear from you, how do you consider this kind of solution? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, you are correct. Unfortunately, you are correct. And I explain you why. Because in case the world would be more stable and more predictable, there would be no need for countries to have their nuclear weapon in order to defend their sovereignty. Because we can see well the story of North Korea. Why it happened so? North Korea was it means fully it is Korean People's Democratic Republic. It was part of the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. And the Korean People's Democratic Republic felt itself safe because it was protected by the Soviet nuclear umbrella. But what happened as the result of Gorbachev's perestroika? Gorbachev, led, in my opinion, by false ideas, he has fallen himself in the embracement by the West as he has seen the situation. In reality, as it turned out to be, there was no one in the West ready to embrace poor, stupid Gorbachev. The idea was to make a fool from him in order that he disarmed himself, destroys his country. And the result was also that from the North Korea, it was taken out the nuclear umbrella of the powerful Soviet Union. It was still under the Soviet Union last year of its existence when, without asking our formal ally, North Korea, Gorbachev and his Minister of Foreign Affairs, Shevardnadze, have concluded diplomatic relations with the South of Korea. The process to establish diplomatic relations was going on already, with the participation and consultations of the North Korea, but all of the sudden being in the United States in San Francisco, the Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Shevardnadze, signed there an agreement about diplomatic relations with the South Korea. The result was that the North Korea immediately withdrew from the Treaty of Non-Proliferation, rejected all explanations which Shevardnadze tried to give when he went to North Korea to explain. He was even not received there. And North Korea has seen a possibility to defend itself in the establishment of nuclear weaponry. Of course, it is a very regretful way, but as we see today, there was no other chance to survive for North Korea. And I do not know what is your opinion, but in my opinion, if it would be different, taken, for example, today that the North Korea would not possess the nuclear weapons, I'm sure it would be the destiny of Iran today. Why the United States, they threaten North Korea, but they do not do anything about it? Because they understand that they will get nuclear response. It is I repeat, it is a very regretful situation because the best would be to get rid of nuclear weapons at all. But for it, the world should be safe, should be predictable, should have a reliable global governance. And this is not the world today. Today we live in the world where For example, as now we see in Iran, the United States openly are spitting on the international law. What said Mr. Trump? He said, the only law for me, it is my only decision. I am responsible only in front of myself. It means we cannot rely upon such world. This is why many countries, unfortunately, I repeat, see a possibility to defend their sovereignty in making themselves stronger to such extent that no one would pretend to unleash a war against this country, to somehow subordinate it, because we see that the West, it is a bunch of predators. They are accustomed to live on the cost of others, or their wellness is built on the exploitation of colonial people in the past. Today they cannot live another way. This is why they cannot stop. What is behind all this blah blah about democracy? Everywhere where the United States and the West intervenes, it is because of natural resources. It was Iraq, oil, it was Libya, oil, it was Syria, gas and oil, it was Venezuela recently, and Iran was unlucky enough to have big resources of oil and gas. And all other explanations, like it is a danger for somebody and so on. Anyone who is understanding a little bit more than a children garden understand that it is all false argumentation, just to serve the open aggression. This is my answer.
Thank you very much indeed, Yury. And Joe, you are welcome.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, I hear you well.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I love that idea of thinking intergenerationally. Absolutely love it. I have a question. You mentioned a need for explanatory knowledge. So I'm curious what you noticed in your research or what you didn't notice in the current knowledge for you to realize that we actually are missing more explanatory knowledge.
Thank you for your question. It is, as a matter of fact, a very important question, because we all, as I understand, are engaged in the academic sphere. What is meant under explanatory knowledge? I mentioned that I am a member of the World Academy of Art and Science, which was established on the initiative of great scientists Einstein, Oppenheimer, and Bertrand Russell. It was more than 70 years ago. However, the notion of explanatory knowledge, I believe, was invented within the framework of studies of this academy. Why they especially stress explanatory? Because not every knowledge explains. Sometimes we are producing knowledge just for knowledge, which does not explain the questions which are behind. This is why they invented, and I support it, they invented the notion of explanatory knowledge, that the knowledge we produce should explain also the questions, because we, all of us, I believe, know the situations when a scientist writes a thesis that this or this and that, but what for and why, he forgets to say. and behind this notion of explanatory knowledge, in my opinion, there is a lot of sense, because you work not only for the basket of papers, but you work for the good of the humanity. You're trying to explain what is interesting for people, what is the sense for them, what makes this sense. This is why I stressed, and I'm happy that you heard me, that this is important. Because there are two, I mentioned another one also. In this global report by UNESCO on education, there is also one new invention, which in my opinion is also important. It is regenerative education. It means education which regenerates the values and senses, which brings back to a human being the sense of his existence. This is why I think such inventions, they are worth mentioning, and I'm happy that you heard me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've got questions from Richard, and then Form, and then Kifle, and I can see also some in chat. So let's start with Richard.
Yes, good afternoon to you. I think most often I do have a problem with my mic or what microphone or what. Am I audible?
I do not hear you well. Can you repeat, please?
I said, am I audible? Can you hear me well?
Yes, now it is better.
Okay, thank you. With the issue of would there be a change in the United Nations, or what do we do to, foundate its properly? I would want to say that already the SDGs are set, and everyone follows it, whether there is conflict or there is one. We need to assume at the end of that time with which assessment of it will be done, and then new sets will put forward. So I hope we need to believe in the United Nations. Thank you.
I agree with you that we have to believe in the United Nations, because presently we have no better choice. We should improve it. We should guarantee the presence of Africa. We should guarantee the presence of Latin America, of India, as I said, in the composition of the permanent members of the United Nations. But I would like to mention also one important element. The West and its representatives in the United Nations, they are now attacking what they call the veto right. But as a matter of fact, if you read the statutes of the United Nations, you will not find there the expression veto right. What is meant in the statutes of the United Nations? It is meant the unanimity in taking important decisions by all members, all permanent members of the Security Council. I think it is easy to see the difference. One is unanimity, another one is veto right. Practically, it means almost the same, because in case one member does not agree, the decision cannot be taken. But the approach is absolutely different. I would say contrary. One, it is to strive for unanimity. Another one, use the prohibition instrument like veto. And it is interesting that I mentioned that the frame of the United Nations was initially discussed in Yalta by great leaders of the anti-Hitlerite coalition. And when they discussed the future United Nations organization, they also tried to exclude the mistakes which were made by the League of Nations. The organization existed between two wars. It was the first attempt to establish a universal organization, League of Nations. It is, by the way, I would mention on the margin field, nota bene, as they say, that one of the biggest, let us say, promoters of the idea of the League of Nations was American President Woodrow Wilson. He proposed his plan of 14 points for the post-war regulation after the First World War. And he advocated the League of Nations, and he made the allies, France and Britain, agree that the point about League of Nations will be a part of Peace Treaty of Paris of 1919. But the joke was that the American Congress, after debating the question about joining or not joining the League of Nations, refused the proposal by the President Wilson to join the League of Nations, and they said it is not compatible with the preservation of United States sovereignty. So the United States, having advocated heavily for the League of Nations, had to abstain from joining it, and they were never members in the League of Nations. And the League of Nations was dominated by France and Britain. And in order to avoid it, the American President Franklin Roosevelt proposed to have first permanent members of the Security Council as countries who should guarantee the post-war peace and cooperation, and that they should unanimously adopt important decisions about peace and war, about cooperation, about existential problems of the humanity. It was the proposal, by the way, by the American president. Churchill that time still British Prime Minister, was against. But Stalin, he supported Roosevelt in it, and it was taken the decision like it works now. But of course, what I fully agree with you, we should preserve the backbone of international relations, because in the absence of the system, which was destroyed at the end of the 80s, beginning of 90s, in the absence of the world system of international relations, they can be somehow managed only by the United Nations system. You somehow rejected by I did not understand what. Yeah. Anyway, this is my way I see it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Form. And then Kifley, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. And thank you, Prof, for the presentation.
I think it's my turn.
Historical, present, and very interdisciplinary. I really enjoyed it. And I had 3 questions. I had 2 questions, but then your last answer triggered me to add a third one, which concerns the veto law in the United Nations. I really don't understand. It's 5 countries that have it. And then I always wonder, why can't Russia oppose some decisions, for instance, that maybe France or UK or America, especially to be precise, in the intervention of in Libya, for instance, do you have any idea why couldn't Russia block that decision for that NATO war in Libya? Can you say something about it? And
Yes, of course I can say
okay.
about it. I know the situation very well. And I would like to remind you about the circumstances of discussion on this question in the Security Council. There was proposed one project of resolution. It was rejected. There was another proposal. It was rejected. And finally, there was a proposal coming basically from the Western countries, which was built on the presupposition that it is about the closing of the airspace in order to prevent victims among civil population. However, what happened in reality, it was that Russia, in order to pass the resolution which would prevent the bloodshed in Libya, Russia did not agree to this resolution, but it abstained. China abstained as well. It was passed by 3 votes of permanent members and other members, temporary members of the Security Council. But what happened? The West cheated bluntly, because what they did after, it was military aggression against Libya. They misused the resolution of the United Nations. And I would say, because professionally I'm a diplomat, and my colleague who served that time in Libya, he has sent a number of messages stressing exactly that point, that we should not trust in this situation the Western countries, because they can cheat us. And it happened, as a matter of fact, because it remains a kind of lesson that the West is not to be trusted. It can cheat anytime it is in the interest of the West.
So it means Russia didn't see that coming.
Russia made a mistake. It should have blocked this resolution, but it abstained in order to stop the possibility of bloodshed in Libya. But the result was contrary. Because the situation was misused by the West, and in the first time, in the case of Libya, it was not the United States, it was France. France was the main breaker of the agreement achieved among the situation in Libya. French helicopters destroyed the convoy of the Libyan leader Gaddafi. Because of that, he was captured and killed. The blood of Gaddafi is on French hands.
Yeah. We've had a continuation of that story, but my other question is a bit historical of this historical figure from the 18th century who lived in Russia. It's called Abraham Petrovich Hannibal, and he had a family and he had children. And my question is a bit historical. Do you know of the continuation of the heritage of that figure in the history of Russia, and how far or how best do you know about his family up to now?
Yes, thank you for this very interesting question. I would like to a little bit enlarge my response and to say that in the process of colonization of Africa, there remained only two independent countries. All others were colonized. What were the two independent countries? One of them was Liberia. It was a country established by the United States for the repatriation of Africans. But another country, it was an ancient civilization, Ethiopia. That time it was called Abyssinia. Why it happened so? Why it remained untouched? Why it remained independent? Because first, Ethiopia, that time Abyssinia, was to a large extent Orthodox, like Russia. Because of that, it was protected by Russia. It had a close links to Russia. The kings of Abyssinia visited frequently Russia. Some from kings' families studied in Russia. And Hannibal, whom you mentioned, he was also from Abyssinia. He came as an assistant and friend of our great Tsar Peter I, called Peter the Great. He made a great career. Finally, he became a Tsar General. One who succeeded in this family was our greatest Russian poet Pushkin, Alexander Pushkin. He mixed in himself Abyssinian and Russian blood. Today, celebrating Pushkin, we say, Pushkin, it is ours everything. We highly praise this greatest figure of our culture. And I can continue with a number of examples of people from Africa who contributed to our development in Russia and in the Soviet Union and earlier in the Russian Empire. Besides the most famous family of Hannibal, there were other families from Africa who reached high positions in Russian society, in the Russian army. There were several known fighters who helped reject the Napoleon aggression against Russia in 1812. There were African people who participated in the October Socialist Revolution in 1917. There were members of the international brigades helping to establish Soviet power during the Civil War and countering the Western invasion in 1919-1920. So we are linked closely with Africa also because of our solidarity with the fight of African people for independence. We have always been and we remain together with African people in it. We helped this liberation struggle by actions of solidarity, by our participation. We brought it till the final end because the South African countries, they became independent only in the 80s, such as Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and we were, of course, against the policy which was a kind of an attempt to impose on us that we should withdraw from Africa, withdraw from Asia, withdraw from Latin America in order to be just servants for the United States and the West. It was an unfortunate period of the beginning of the 90s when the glorious Soviet Union was destroyed from inside because of the traitors and of their degradation. But we preserved our relations with Africa. We highly praise these relations. And as you know, under President Putin, there were a number of summits, Russia, Africa. One of them, recently, it was the summit with the partition of all African states without any inclusion. All of them were in Moscow participating in this summit. And last year a new department was established in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the development of relations with Africa. It is a department in addition to the Department of Africa, which is responsible for current relationship with Africa. New department, it is for the development of joint projects, joint attitudes, joint positions, and joint struggle against those who would like to establish again colonial relationships. This is that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so my question was more about the historical figure and his descendants, but if you know of that family particularly and how it continues, that was actually
nowadays there is a big work done in UNESCO. They establish the history of Africa. As to my knowledge, there are already 5 books on the history of Africa composed. We're participating in this work as well.
okay.
And what I also could propose in May, on the 21st of May, we shall have a large international conference on global transformations and on global management. It is within the world program of UNESCO, which is called MOST Management of Social Transformations. I invite everyone who is interested to participate in it, and even if you find it useful, we can establish a special section within the conference devoted to Africa.
Okay,
We can
thank you.
discuss it. We can discuss it larger with our African friends in order that we stress the importance of this relationship which belongs now to our foreign policy priorities. So
wonderful.
if you find it interesting, through Professor Mutalemwa, we can establish such a section and join the discussion, exchange opinions. I think it would be an interesting and important event.
All right. Thank you very much,
Thank
Professor.
you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Kifle, and then we will take actually one more question. There is one. Kifle, please go first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you, Professor Yury, for this thought-provoking presentation, which I have enjoyed. And also, I would like to excuse myself ahead of time in case you had already spoken about it, because I came a bit late. But on this principle of education, the 5 principles of education transformation, could there be, first of all, I definitely agree with you about some sort of indigenization of education, not imposed from outside, but somehow from within. From the principles you mentioned, could there be collateral outcomes, and how, if so, how would we manage that?
Thank you for your question. And the 5D policy, which I mentioned, it is a proposal for everybody, because, frankly speaking, we ourselves in Russia have also to get rid from what could be called colonization of our mind. I would like to mention one very important, in my opinion, one very important research done by Chinese Research Center Xinhua. It was published in September 2025. You can find it easily in the internet. It is called Colonization of the Mind. Colonization of the Consciousness. It is very important because sometimes we even do not understand to what kind our brain could be colonized. I can tell you that only a year ago we were liberated. For example, me as a teacher at the Moscow State University, I was my scientific activity was measured according to standards of Scopus. What is Scopus? Scopus is a private company acting. There were different publications. I do not know to what extent it is correct or not, that they are working under the aegis of the CIA and so on. But anyway, so or not, but why we should be oriented on the standards of a private American group or anyone else? We have our national system of education, and this is for every country. Of course, we all are interested to take the best from the experience of others. But it does not mean that we should be subjected to educational or any other standards imposed on us by somebody. We have our sovereignty. We are in Russia absolutely convinced about the necessity to defend it by all means. And now, countering the aggression of the West against us, we're doing exactly this, defending our sovereignty. Because otherwise, without our response by military force, it would happen to us what is happening today to Iran, or what happened in Gaza. This is why the education is very important. And answering also one of the questions in the chat section about the possibility to get copy of the paper. First, as I imagine, it is recorded, but in order to make it easier, I can simply send to Professor Mutalemwa the text, or let us say the theses along which I spoke today. Maybe it would make it easier somehow. And with this, I'll send also more comprehensive presentation of this educational proposal. So I'll do it immediately after our session, and you can get it from Professor Mutalemwa and use however you want. It is not occasional, the reference to the report by the World Academy of Art and Science, because I used it in my presentation. And I also draw your attention to, let us say, international components of our way of thinking, because we take into account the position of our African friends, of our Chinese friends, Latin American friends, of world, as they call it, laboratories of thought, like UNESCO, like Club of Rome. I am also a member of the Club of Rome, like World Academy of Art and Science. This is why I believe that condensed in this quite short way, it might be useful. And if you would like to use it anyway, it is all up to your decision.
Thank you very much indeed. Actually, we're conscious of time, but then I can see that Abu Bakr has been raising his hand for quite some time. If you could just make it short, and you'll be given this time. Abu Bakr.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you, the presenter, and thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the presentation, but I have one question, if I want to put it that way. I have only one question. I want to find out the war, the position of Trump in regard to what is happening now. In his first term, he never undertook any war against any country. So it was peaceful, if I want to consider it his first term. So now, when he came back now, his second term, if I want to put it that way, making war against many countries. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Could you repeat that question now?
I understood your question. I'm ready to answer.
So what I'm saying is that what Trump is doing currently, is it his own agenda or it is the agenda of United States of America? That is what I want to know. What is happening currently? What he's doing, looking at the war here and there.
I can answer your question. I find this question very important. And what happened to the position of Trump, it is more or less typical for Western countries which call themselves democracies. Because Trump came to the election with slogans contrary to what he is doing now. What he said, we should no more interfere in foreign affairs, in internal affairs of foreign countries. We should no more unleash wars in other countries. We should no more deal with the affairs of other countries. We should concentrate on our own countries and make America great again. It was his MAGA movement. Today, those people who supported him, who voted for it, they see themselves cheated, because some of those, for example, the vice president, of course, he should, due to the position he occupies, he should support the president. But I see that he is not fully in agreement with what is going on, because the promise was absolutely different. But this you can see everywhere. In Great Britain, the same. The promise was one, the reality different. In Germany, the promise was one, the reality contrary. In France, Macron came with one position, playing absolutely different role. But second part of your question, what is the position of the United States and of other countries in the foreign policy? Generally, it should be measured on the basis of the official document, which is called differently in different countries, but it is a concept of the foreign policy usually approved by the president or by the head of state. Such concept comes anew with every new president, usually. And in the United States, it comes a little bit later after the nomination of after the election of the president. Now it appeared. I advise you to have, it is called in the United States, national directives for the foreign policy. I advise you to have a look on it. It is available in internet. And according to what is written in this document, the same also for the concept of foreign relations of the Russian Federation. According to it, you can judge about the intentions of the country at the world level. So more or less, I also would like to mention that when I was in the International Union of Students, I had a friend whose name was Abu Bakr, and he was from Africa. This is why it is very pleasant for me to answer this question.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Yury, for your time for this excellent presentation, for the discussion. And I thank everybody who has been able to join us today. I thank you all very much indeed. And I welcome you back next week. We will continue with exciting discussions. Thank you and bye-bye for now.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.